Mark I, the iron rhomboid that changed war forever. September 15th, 1916. The fields near the Somme River in northern France. Dawn is breaking over a landscape that barely qualifies as Earth anymore. Churned mud, shell craters, coils of barbed wire stretching to the horizon, and the bones of men who died trying to cross it. 2 years of industrial-scale slaughter have produced virtually nothing except a geography of devastation. German machine gunners settle into their positions. They have seen every attack the British can throw at them. Waves of infantry cut down in seconds, cavalry charges that ended in mass graves, artillery barrages that shook the earth for days and still couldn't break the line. They are not afraid. They know what's coming. They know how this works. Then they hear something none of them have ever heard before. A grinding, clanking roar. The earth shaking not from shells, but from something moving through the mud toward them. Something enormous. Something that doesn't stop for barbed wire. Something that swallows machine gun fire and keeps coming. 49 British soldiers are not walking into that barbed wire today. They are riding inside something that has never existed before, something that weighs 28 tons and looks in the gray morning light like a prehistoric metal beast from a nightmare. The tank has arrived, and nothing about the way humans kill each other will ever be the same. To understand why the Mark I was built, you first need to understand the specific horror it was designed to solve. The First World War had done something that military planners in 1914 had genuinely not anticipated. It had turned itself off. The 19th century's romantic vision of decisive, mobile warfare, cavalry charges, flanking maneuvers, armies sweeping across open ground, collapsed within weeks of the war's beginning. By the end of 1914, both the Allied and German armies had dug themselves into a system of trenches that stretched from the English Channel to the Swiss border. Nearly 700 kilometers of continuous earthworks defended by machine guns, artillery, and millions of men who had nowhere to advance and nowhere to retreat. The machine gun was the instrument of the deadlock. A single well-positioned machine gun crew of 2 men could hold an advance of thousands. At the Battle of the Somme in July 1916, the same battle in which the Mark I would later debut, the British Army suffered 57,470 casualties on the first day alone, the bloodiest single day in British military history. Most of them were cut down by machine gun fire before they reached the German wire. General staffs on both sides tried everything. Artillery barrages of unprecedented scale. Weeks of continuous bombardment meant to destroy the wire and suppress the defenders. They didn't work. The artillery warned the enemy, destroyed the ground the advancing infantry then had to cross, and rarely destroyed enough defenders to make the assault viable. Gas attacks, tunneling under enemy positions and detonating enormous mines. Waves and waves of infantry. Nothing broke the stalemate. The mathematics of the trench were brutal and simple. The defender with a machine gun always had an asymmetric advantage over an attacker crossing open ground. The only way to win was to change the ground rules entirely. Someone needed to build something that could cross no man's land, survive machine gun fire, crush barbed wire, and carry its own firepower forward without exposing human bodies to the killing zone. The idea did not come from the Army, it came from the Navy. In early 1915, a group of engineers and military thinkers, operating under the authority of the Admiralty, specifically under the influence of First Lord of the Admiralty Winston Churchill, formed what became known as the Landship Committee. Their mandate: design a self-propelled armored vehicle capable of crossing trenches and surviving battlefield fire. The challenges were enormous. No existing vehicle could cross a trench of the width found on the Western Front. typically 2 to 3 meters wide, and often wider. No existing engine was powerful enough to haul sufficient armor across the cratered, waterlogged ground that characterized the front, and the entire project had to be kept completely secret, because if Germany learned what was being developed and adapted its defenses in advance, the element of surprise, the single most critical tactical advantage the new weapon possessed, would be lost. The design that emerged from months of engineering was radical and strange. Rather than the wheeled or conventional tracked configuration of farm tractors and existing armored vehicles, the designers chose a rhomboid shape, a diamond profile, with the tracks running the full perimeter of the vehicle's outline from front to back. This configuration, which gave the Mark I its nickname, the Rhomboid, or the lozenge, served a specific purpose. By maximizing the length of track in contact with obstacles, the tank could climb over and cross trenches far wider than any conventional tracked vehicle could manage. The result was a machine 9 meters long, 4 meters wide, and 2.5 meters tall, weighing 28 tons. Its Daimler 105 horsepower engine moved all of that mass at a maximum speed of 6 kilometers per hour on flat ground and approximately 3 kilometers per hour across broken terrain. Its armor, 6 to 12 millimeters of hardened steel, was proof against rifle and machine gun fire, but vulnerable to direct artillery hits. To maintain secrecy during production and transportation, workers were told they were building water storage containers for desert use. The vehicles were documented as tanks. The code name became the permanent name. The Mark I came in 2 variants with names that sound almost quaint: male and female. The male carried 2 6-pounder naval guns and sponsons, armored blisters on each side of the hull, along with machine guns. The female carried only machine guns, designed to accompany the male and protect it against enemy infantry, attempting to swarm and disable it at close range. Britain produced 75 of each variant, for a total of 150 Mark Is. Inside, 8 men worked in conditions that were close to intolerable. The engine ran through the center of the hull, directly accessible, not separated by a firewall, not isolated by compartmentalization. Temperatures inside a moving Mark I regularly reached 50 degrees Celsius. Carbon monoxide fumes from the engine and gun propellant accumulated continuously. The noise of the engine, the guns, the tracks grinding over obstacles made verbal communication impossible. Crews developed a system of hand signals and physical contact to coordinate. Visibility through narrow armored slits was so limited that commanders frequently had no idea where they were or what was directly in front of them. The British High Command, under General Douglas Haig, wanted to use the new tanks in overwhelming numbers for maximum shock effect. His advisors on tank development agreed. Deploy them in mass, concentrate them, preserve the surprise for a moment when it could be truly decisive. Haig overruled them. With the Somme offensive stalling and pressure mounting for results, he ordered the tanks deployed immediately, in whatever numbers were available, to support an infantry attack near the villages of Flers and Courcelette. 49 Mark is moved forward that morning. Of those, only 32 actually reached their starting positions. The rest had broken down on the approach march. Of the 32, only 9 advanced successfully alongside the infantry in the initial assault. The rest bogged down in craters, ditched in trenches, suffered mechanical failures, or were put out of action by German fire. And yet, even those 9 tanks achieved something extraordinary. German soldiers, who had been informed by their officers that no weapon existed that could threaten their positions from across no man's land, broke and ran. Not all of them, not everywhere, but in the sectors where the tanks appeared, the psychological effect was documented, undeniable. and exactly what the designers had hoped for. A British RFC pilot flying overhead reported seeing a tank walking up the high street of flares with the British Army cheering behind it. The village fell. The tactical results were mixed. The strategic results were minimal. The Somme offensive ground on for another 2 months without breakthrough. But the principle had been proven beyond any doubt. An armored, self-propelled vehicle could cross no man's land, survive machine gun fire, and create the conditions for infantry advance. The lock of the Western Front had a key. The problem was that only 9 tanks had shown up to use it. The Mark I's combat debut exposed every weakness in the design simultaneously. And the British Army's response to those weaknesses is itself a masterclass in rapid military adaptation. Mechanical reliability was catastrophic. The vehicle's tracks, suspension, and transmission were pushed far beyond their engineering tolerances by the conditions of the Western Front. Mud, the omnipresent, sucking, equipment-destroying mud of the Somme, packed into every gap, seized every moving part, and defeated machines that had performed perfectly on test grounds in England. The operational range of 37 kilometers was entirely theoretical in combat conditions, where fuel consumption was erratic and the ground was nothing like a road. The crew conditions bordered on criminal. The combination of engine fumes, cordite smoke, heat, noise, and near-zero visibility made extended operations nearly impossible. Crew incapacitation from carbon monoxide poisoning and heat exhaustion was common. The absence of any communication system between the tank and accompanying infantry meant that coordination, which the entire tactical concept depended upon, broke down the moment the attack began. The sponson gun mounting, while creative, was a significant tactical limitation. The guns could not fire forward, only to the sides. Anything directly in front of the tank was in a dead zone that the crew could see through their vision slits, but could not engage with main armament. The British response was swift and methodical. The Mark I was followed rapidly by the Mark II, Mark III, and the substantially improved Mark IV, which eliminated the external fuel tank that made the Mark I a fire hazard, improved armor thickness, redesigned the sponsons for easier field removal, and addressed many of the worst mechanical reliability issues. By the Battle of Cambrai in November 1917, 476 tanks were deployed in a single concentrated assault, the mass deployment that advisors had argued for at the Somme, and achieved the largest territorial advance on the Western Front in years, demonstrating once and for all what tanks could accomplish when used correctly. The Mark I's direct legacy is easy to trace. Every tank that followed it, from the French Renault FT that introduced the rotating turret, to the German A7V, to the Sherman and the Tiger, and the T-34 of the Second World War, descends conceptually from those 150 British rhomboids built in 1916. But the deeper legacy is doctrinal, not mechanical. The Mark I proved a principle that military theorists had argued about in the abstract, that technology could break a tactical deadlock that human bravery could not, that the battlefield could be re-engineered, not just fought across, that the infantryman's fundamental vulnerability, exposure, could be solved by putting him inside metal rather than sending him across open ground. The argument about how to use that principle correctly, concentrated or dispersed, leading or supporting, fast or heavy, would define tank doctrine for the next century and still hasn't been fully resolved. The Mark I's disastrous debut at the Somme, where too few tanks were deployed too early with too little preparation, remains one of history's clearest examples of how squandering a technological advantage at the moment of first use can cost more than the advantage is worth. Haig used the tank to support an infantry attack. A generation later, Guderian would use the tank to replace infantry entirely as the decisive element. The difference between those two visions, support weapon versus main weapon, is the difference between 1916 and 1940. In the summer of 1916, a British engineer stood in front of a 28-ton iron rhomboid in a test field in Hertfordshire, watched it crush a line of stakes and cross a ditch that would have stopped any vehicle previously built, and understood that the world had changed. He couldn't have known exactly how much. He couldn't have traced the line from that test field to the T-34 rolling off Soviet production lines in the Urals, to the Abrams burning across the Iraqi desert, to the tank drone battles being fought right now across eastern Ukraine. But the line runs there, straight and unbroken. One machine, 9 meters long, 6 kilometers per hour. 8 terrified, half-suffocated men inside a steel oven, grinding through the mud of the Somme toward German machine guns that had never failed before. The Rhomboid didn't win the First World War. It didn't even win the battle it was sent to fight. But it asked the question that every army on Earth has been trying to answer ever since. And it asked it in iron.